this. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in June, and he healed me. I believe that. I did have surgery, but I'm clear. So I give praise to the Lord. You know, he found me a good surgeon, got it out, and I'm clear. And I believe I will stay clear because of the Lord.
Praise God.
So I want to honor him again by being baptized
That's
again.
great, thanks. I know when she says again, I know we talk about one baptism. She was baptized as a child, but this is something that she wants to do now that she's older herself, to signify that, and we rejoice in that. Mark, do you want to kind of work down from that end? We'll meet in the middle somewhere.
Okay, John, why are you getting baptized this morning?
Well, I was christened when I was a baby in the Church of England. As a teenager, I got confirmed. And it's just something that I feel I need to do now. So, yeah.
Thank you, John.
Hey, Josh, tell us how old you are, Josh.
11.
11 years old, and why do you want to be baptized this morning?
Because I want to follow Jesus.
Great, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Hey, Jasmine, why are you being baptized this morning?
Because I love Jesus and this is something I feel like I need to do.
Okay, from one Helliwell to another, Tim.
Because I've loved Jesus for my whole life and I want to do what he says and make him proud.
Right, that's brilliant. Well done.
Okay, Elise, why are you being baptized today?
Because God's made himself known to me and I want to show that I'm committed and I'm listening and that I have got some faith in me.
Okay, Harvey, tell us why you want to be baptized this morning.
I love God and Jesus and I want to give my life to them.
Great, brilliant. Well done, mate.
Okay, Katie, why are you being baptized this morning?
I want to follow Jesus.
Okay, good answer, like your brothers.
Okay, Josie, you've got all your family all along that line there, so there's no pressure now. Okay, but just tell us why you want to be baptized today.
Because I love Jesus and I want to follow him.
Right, well done.
Okay, Ruby, why would you like to be baptized?
I love God and Jesus and I believe Jesus died for us.
Excellent.
And I get the honour of asking my daughter, last but by no means least, Evie, why do you want to be baptized today?
Because I really love Jesus and I want to show everyone that I do.
That's great. Well done. Why don't you give them all another round of applause? We're going to... Okay, you guys can take your seats. In fact, kids, don't get too comfy. We're going to let you go off to your program now. So if you're involved in the kids' church or the youth program this morning, if you want to just make your way upstairs, we're going to see you back here at about 10 past, quarter past. Yeah. Just great to see so many of you here this morning. Just like Mark said about the newcomers meal, we might not have been able to have got round everyone yet to hand you an invitation, but please don't be shy. Come and ask us for one, grab us to get hold of one. Please let us know if you are going to be here next Sunday. It's really important just so we can cater accordingly. We don't mind if there's more food than people, because we normally get to take that home and we can enjoy it again later, so we don't mind. But it'd be really helpful for us if you can let us know that you're going to be here, and if you've got any dietary requirements as well. just so we can obviously get that prepared accordingly. Turn with me, if you've got a Bible, to Matthew chapter 5. I'm going to try and wrap this up by about 10 past, quarter past 12. And we're going to take up an offering. We're going to have a song. Band are going to come back and lead us in a song as we take up our tithes and offerings this morning, just while we get ready. And then we're actually going to carry on then with the actual baptisms, because that's what most of you have come here for today, isn't it? to see them being baptized. We want to kick off a brand new series this morning that's going to take us right up to Christmas. That we're going to be looking at the Beatitudes here in Matthew chapter 5 that Jesus gave us, right at the start of what was undoubtedly his most famous sermon, where he began right at the start of his ministry there to lay out his manifesto, if you like, what life in the kingdom, what life living as a Christian really is all about and how that looks. Of course, that sermon was the Sermon on the Mount, and we're calling it the Pursuit of Happyness. Some of you may have seen that film starring Will Smith with the same title. We've just really nicked that title of that film for this series because we believe it really carries the heart of what these 8 sayings give us. See, one of the things I often hear people saying when I talk to them, and maybe you've heard people saying this themselves as well, is if they could have one thing more than anything in life, what would it be? And so often people say, I just want to be happy. Might have been something that you've said yourself or you would say yes to this morning also. It's not perhaps necessarily more money that you're after, although you might think that would bring you happiness, or a better job, or a bigger house, or all those things that we often chase after. People just want to be happy. I guess if we'd really thought about it, we should have had that song by Pharrell, shouldn't we, from Despicable Me. I promise you we've in no way rehearsed that for this morning. Now we know that happiness, of course, is dependent upon happenings. When things are going well in your life, normally that brings you some degree of happiness, doesn't it? Hello? But when things aren't going that well, then it's so often a different story. The happiness very quickly begins to disappear, and it's replaced instead by things like misery and disappointment and anxiety. And I'm sure many of us can testify to that this morning in our lives. But I believe that what Jesus gives us here, and we're going to read them together in just a few moments, is the key to discovering what true happiness really is and how it can be achieved in our lives and how we can begin to live in a place of greater blessing in our lives. Because how many of you would say yes to more of God's blessing upon your life today? Just put your hand up if that's you. That's the vast majority of us here this morning. You see, the word bless in the Bible is the Greek word makarios. And a literal translation of that word, makarios, is our word happy. So to be blessed, you could say, is to be happy. To have God's blessing on your life is to have happiness in your life. And so when Jesus talks about being blessed if you do this or do these things, what he's saying is that you'll really begin to discover true happiness if you do this. It's the same word. And here at the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount, he gives us eight ways that we can discover God's blessing upon our lives. 8 ways to be happy, you could say. Why don't we read them together? Matthew chapter 5, and we'll just read the first 12 verses. Now, when he saw the crowds, he went upon a mountainside and sat down, and his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You know, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went upon a mountainside, we read there. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him and he began to teach them. Did you know that back in Jesus' day, the teacher always sat and the people, the audience, always stood? You know where this is going, don't you? I think that would be a really good idea. I'm going to be standing up a lot in a little bit in some water, and as someone who wants to be more like Jesus in his life, I think it'd be good if we did things a little bit differently this morning, don't you? That if I perhaps just grab a chair and come and sit down, and then for the next 30 minutes, you all stand. Is anyone up for that today? Just one. Thank you, Madupe. Jesus sits down, and then he gives them the first of these 8 conditions for being blessed by God. He says these words, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And to begin with, let me just say something about the kingdom of heaven. Jesus spoke a lot about the kingdom. If you look through the Gospels, you'll see that phrase coming up many, many times. He often referred to it as the kingdom of God. It's one and the same thing. He said, but my kingdom is not of this world. It's from another place. And it's important to just grab hold of that this morning, because when we talk about the kingdom, and this is going to come up, I'm sure, as we work our way through these Beatitudes over the next few months, it's important to remember when we talk about the kingdom that we're not talking about a geographical place or something spatial, but it's a spiritual kingdom whose capital city isn't in Jerusalem, but in heaven. You see, what we're talking about here is, if you like, the culture of heaven invading earth and being demonstrated through you and me as we live our lives out before God and before one another, where we become a visible representation or a representation, if you like, of Jesus, of what it means to follow him, which, as we know, as we worked our way through that series in Colossians that we've just done, should be attractive to those around us. In fact, in Titus's book, it says, I want you to make sure that your lives and the gospel becomes attractive to other people, because they should notice something different about you. If you're a believer here today, they should be able to notice something different about you and me and the way we live our lives before them. And so these Beatitudes here aren't physical conditions, but they're spiritual states. And this opening one is absolutely crucial because it's foundational to all the others that follow on after it. If you're going to build a house, what's the first thing that you're going to dig out? It's the foundations, isn't it? Because if they're unstable, if they're a little bit shaky, it doesn't matter how much you try and how attractive that thing is that you try and build on top of it. If those foundations are shaky, that house is not, or that building is not going to last for very long, because the foundations are going to give way. And so this first beatitude that we're looking at this morning is the foundation, if you like, upon which all the others are laid. In fact, it's key to understanding the whole of the rest of the Sermon on the Mount and what it's like to live as a Christian, because the truth is it's not something you or I can do in and of ourselves or in our own strength. It's like Jesus is saying to us here, here's the mountain that you have to climb, the heights that you've got to scale. And the first thing that you have to realize is this, that as you look at the mountain and all that's in front of you, that you're told to ascend, the truth is you can't do it. That might sound really discouraging, but that's the truth. Like, we can't live as Christians without the help of the Holy Spirit. We can't do it without Jesus' help. We need him to help us and live in us and through us, don't we? In order that we can fulfill what the scriptures give us. Let me try and show you what I mean with this, because there's a very logical sequence to them as you work your way through each of these 8 Beatitudes. First of all, there's a recognition of our need for God. That's poor in spirit. We're going to unpack that a little bit more in a moment, where we realize that before him, we're broken people. Without him, we're hopeless. And by that I mean we have no hope for the future. And so when we recognize that, that causes us to repent of our self-sufficiency. We mourn. As a result of that, we then quit calling all the shots ourselves over our lives. And we surrender control to God. We become meek. We inherit the earth. And of course, then we begin to yearn for more of him. We hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now, those first four are all preparational, if you like. They deal with the character inside of us, with those character issues, the things that God works on the inside of us. But then there are those that are expressional, that deal with the outworking of that which God has been doing within in them previous four. Because just like we were saying in that series on Colossians, there has to be an outworking of all of this, doesn't there? It's no good saying this is what I believe if it doesn't affect the way that we live out our lives and the way that we behave. Something somewhere has gone wrong. We've missed the point somewhere along the lines. It has to affect the way that we live our lives. Otherwise, what's the point? What we've got is a whole load of knowledge and a whole load of theory without any kind of application at all. So what happens is this. As we grow closer to him, God begins to work in our lives. We become more and more like him. We forgive others. We're merciful. That brings a change in our outlook. We become pure in heart, which of course impacts our relationships with one another. See, nothing's more important than other people. The only thing that's going to get to heaven is other people. Doesn't matter how many possessions we've got in this life, none of them we're going to take with us. But we want to see that populated with friends and family and those that we love, don't we? So nothing's more important than people. And because of what God's doing in our hearts, we love others. It affects how we live and how we relate to others. We become peacemakers. So when there's a breakdown in relationship, we look to find ways to mend that. We've been given the ministry of reconciliation. That's what the New Testament teaches us. And of course, as a result of that as well, we also endure justice. We get persecuted at times. We become more and more like Jesus in every way. Paul said, I don't just want to share in his blessings. I also want to obviously identify myself with his sufferings. We know Jesus suffered cruelly at the hands of the Roman people, of the religious people of the day. And if we really want to follow him, there's going to be times when we face persecution in our lives. You know, when I became a Christian 22 and a half years ago, I started getting called all kinds of names by my mates. McVicar, the Reverend. That was actually quite prophetic, that was, hasn't it, considering how... But Bible basher and all those kind of things. Some of you may have had that. And that was difficult as a 23-year-old. I didn't like to hear that, especially when it came from your brother. We might be watching this morning. I love you, Darren. I've forgiven you. Just now in this moment. It's taken me 22 and a half years, but I've released it now and I just feel so much freer and better. Now that my brother was very good to me. And so we think when that happens, we're getting persecuted, but let's be honest, that's nothing compared to what other people, even now as we sit here comfortably this morning facing and enduring in other parts of the world on account of their faith in Jesus, facing death because of that. That's a big game changer, isn't it? That's real persecution. But as I said before, this first one is absolutely key to both understanding and living out the others that follow on afterwards. So what does it mean then to be poor in spirit? I don't think for 1 minute that Jesus is talking here about physical poverty, even though Jesus had a special place in his heart for those who were poor. That wasn't what he was saying. He didn't say, blessed are the poor, but the poor in spirit. So it's really important to understand here that Jesus isn't talking about financial or material or physical poverty, but spiritual poverty. It's really important to grasp hold of this. He's talking about maintaining a certain kind of attitude. You see, they're called the be attitudes. Be these in your life. Another version puts it this way: God blesses those who realize their need for him. See, that original word about being poor in spirit simply means to crouch and to cower. A little bit like a beggar in need of some outside intervention. It's an attitude of humility, coming before God, recognizing actually that we haven't got it all worked out, and that there's areas in our lives where we're broken and we need his help. You see, God opposes the proud, doesn't he? But he gives grace to the humble. In other words, he's saying here that I recognize that I'm not able to live my life without God. Without him, spiritually, I'm poor. In fact, I'm bankrupt. The truth is that you can have all the material riches in the world, and you can have what might appear to be the most comfortable and the blessed life, but before God, without him, you're bankrupt spiritually. Psalm 146 and verse 5 says something similar that, again, just helps us clarify what Jesus means here with this phrase, blessed are the poor in spirit. We read, the Lord God blesses everyone who trusts him and depends on him, which really is the first condition for knowing God's blessing in your life. Discovering a true state of happiness, if that's where you want to get to, you've got to trust him. You've got to depend upon him. That's the bottom line. If you hear nothing else this morning, if you remember nothing else from what I've shared with you, remember this. Put your trust in him. Put your trust in Jesus. You see, if you want a title for the message this morning, it will be very simply this. It all depends on who you depend on. It all depends on who you depend on. That's pretty much what baptism is all about. It's that outward sign, that display of something far greater that has taken place within the hearts of each of those 11 people that stood here before us a few moments ago. They've come to that place of recognizing their need for God. That God gave them life in the first place. It's just simply a coming back and saying, God, I'm sorry that I've tried to live it without you. Now I want you to come and live in me to help me live life really as it should be lived. See, Jesus said that I've come to give you life and life in all its fullness, and we search after all kinds of things to try and bring us that sense of fulfillment and contentment. But the truth is, none of those things, and I'm sure you've discovered this for yourself, it might satisfy you for a few moments when you get that, but yet still there's that longing in your heart for something more. There's that God-shaped void, as someone once described it, inside each of our hearts. And we can go searching after all kinds of things the world over to try and fill it, but the only person who can fill that is Jesus himself, because he's the one who gave us life in the first place. And so for each of these being baptized, they're learning to trust God. They're learning to depend upon God more and more in their lives, to depend upon his wisdom simply instead of their own. And so hear me this morning, if you want God's blessing on your life, and most of you put your hand up to that earlier on, if you want God's blessing on your relationships with others, if you want God's blessing on your work or your career or your finances or your health across every area of your life, then it starts by placing all of your trust and your dependence upon him and on the person of Jesus and what he did for you on the cross 2,000 years ago. Without that, you'll never fully experience life as it was meant to be lived. That's how it was designed to be. The big question for us is, how do we do this on a daily basis? Because sometimes that's difficult, isn't it? Is anyone else prepared to admit to that? At times we try and take things back into our own hands, don't we? Hello? You are miserable this morning. Just over these next few minutes, and I'm not going to be long because we want the kids to come back and join with us as we get ready to baptize people. I want to suggest 3 ways that you can do this, 3 ways that you can open up the door to receive more of God's blessing on your life. And the first one is this, that you say to yourself, I depend on God's wisdom, not mine. I depend on God's wisdom, not mine. In other words, I listen to what God says, I follow his leading, and I do what he tells me to do. Proverbs 14 and verse 12 tells us there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. I wonder how many of us have ever discovered that to be true in our lives, where you followed your own instincts. You felt with everything within you that it was so right, and then you did it. But then it ended up being the dumbest thing that you've ever done. or it failed miserably. Is anyone brave enough to raise their hand to that this morning? Some of you are in denial today, I'm sure. That relationship you always wanted, you went into it, but it ended up in a mess because it was never right in the first place. Or that dream job you always dreamed of, only to get it and to discover it was nothing like what you imagined it to be. The dream house with all the added extras, all the extra rooms and the bigger garden. But you were never going to be able to afford realistically to keep up the repayments. So it ended up sucking the life, not to mention the finance, out of you. Well, that investment you thought was going to bring in the big return, but never did. It seemed right. There's a way that seems right unto man, but in the end it leads to death. I guess if all of us are being honest with ourselves, we could spend the rest of this morning sharing stories, couldn't we? Testimonies of how that has been true for us. Where we look back and we wish we listened to God instead of our gut. Probably because God's full of truth and our gut's full of curry and pizza, isn't it? Maybe that somewhere things didn't quite work out as expected. That's not to say we can never make decisions of ourselves. Of course we can. God's given us common sense. He encourages us to use our brains. The Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, not by the removal. And so God expects us to use our common sense. But the truth is, let's be honest, we as humans do sometimes get things wrong, don't we? We make bad choices. We make bad decisions. Just because we feel something or we want it doesn't mean that it's right. If only we'd listen to him, because 6 months down the road we look back and we think, what on earth was I thinking to have even done that? That's what that verse is all about. There's a way that seems right to us, but often in the end, God says, it just becomes a dead end. It leads to nothing. More heartache and pain. If you want to experience more of God's blessing upon your life, if you want to have fewer dead ends, and it starts by depending on God's wisdom, and not your own feelings, not your own thoughts, or what everyone else might be telling you. It's about trusting in his wisdom, not your own. I love what Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 7. A few people are going to hear this as their baptismal verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In how many of your ways? All of your ways acknowledge him, and he will what? He will make your paths straight. He'll direct your paths. He'll make them straight. So how you spend your time, your money, your relationships, everything that you do, allow him to be the one who guides you and leads you and directs you. How do we do that? I think there's two very simple ways. Number one is you pray. You talk to God about it. You listen to what he says. I look back in my life and I look at some of the dumb decisions I've made, and I can identify that I didn't really talk to God about them. I just shot ahead because I wanted to do it. If only I'd taken those moments just to stop, talk to him, been a little bit more patient and obedient, things could have been very different. But we pray. We talk to God. We listen to what he says. How's your prayer life this morning? And the second thing you do is this. You read. Not Woman's Own, or Hello Mag, or Golf Monthly. Just pointing the finger back on me a little bit. We read the Bible. Hello? We let him talk to us through it. What is it? It says, Psalm 119, verse 105, your word is a lamp unto my feet. When you're a little bit flustered, walking around in the dark, not knowing where to go, what do? We bring it. We read his word. We allow him to begin to illuminate the path ahead of us, to light up where we need to go. Your word's a lamp unto our feet, a light unto my path. You see, that's how you get God's wisdom, isn't it? How many of you know that's not difficult? But how many of us fail to do it in our lives? James tells us in his letter, if any of you lack wisdom, you should what? You should pray. You should ask God, who gives it how? Grudgingly and sparingly? graciously, generously. You see, we're without excuse at the end of the day, aren't we? But God lets us sometimes go down those paths of our own choosing, just to teach us that we need him. Pour in spirit, that attitude. God, I need you in my life. I can't do this thing called life without you. I'm going to make a mess of it. You see, the truth is God doesn't want you to fail. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, aren't there, about who God is. That big policeman in the sky wants to batter you every time you do something wrong. It's so far removed from the God of the Bible. Equally, he's not Father Christmas, got a big sack and just wants to shower blessings upon you. He's a God of justice, a God of truth. He disciplines those who he loves. But he doesn't want you to fail. He doesn't want you to make dumb decisions over things, go into stuff blind. He's a good God. We sing that song, don't we? He's a good, good Father. What father wouldn't want the best for his children? His desire is for you to succeed and prosper in every area of your life. Just wants you to ask him. Talk to him. Discover it for yourself in his word. That's the starting point. Depending on his wisdom, not on your own. But then there's another way, I believe, that we can receive God's blessing on our lives. We depend on his strength, not on our own. His strength. Some of you may have heard me share this before, but believe it or not, I used to go to the gym years ago. It's a long time ago, as you can tell. I've been breathing in all morning whilst I'm singing, so to stop that protruding. And it was great when I first started going. Just with the light weights, I could just about manage them. Problem came when I started adding others to it. And it got a bit heavier and couldn't lift it. It was at those times I needed someone else to come alongside me and spot me and support me. Just give me that helping hand, because I was struggling to lift it on my own. And you know, let's be honest, life can be a lot like that, can't it? You manage on your own to a degree, but then stuff happens. Things hit the fan. The burden suddenly gets a lot heavier, gets a lot tougher. There's times when we can't do things in our own strength and we need the help and support of others. Thank God for church family today. Thank God for good friends. I mean, does anyone here ever get tired? Getting from work? You had a bad day? Let's all just pray for Chris this morning, shall we? You just want to put your feet up, you just want to crash out, you don't always want to talk to anyone. Life's difficult. We all do, don't we? It's because we're human. We all have days like that and times like that. There's times when we need someone stronger to help us. I'm not ashamed today to say that there are times in my life when I think I'm going to crumble under the weight of it all. The expectations, the demands that get placed upon my time, pressures amidst that of raising a family and a dog. Leading a church. Times when if I'm honest, I just feel, God, I just can't cope with this anymore. I'm just too tired. I just want to go and hide in a corner somewhere. But here's what I've discovered over 46 years of being alive, almost 23 years of being a Christian. My strength is limited, but his is unlimited. My strength is finite, but his is infinite. My strength is exhaustible, but his is inexhaustible. He never runs out of energy. He never gets tired. He never slumbers nor sleeps, the scriptures tell us. He doesn't need to. I have to learn to depend on his strength, not on mine. Listen to these verses. I hope they encourage you. Psalm 84 and verse 5. You bless all who depend on you for strength. And Isaiah 40, verse 31, words I'm sure we'll know well. We often sing about them. Those who trust in the Lord for their help will find their strength renewed. They will rise on wings like eagles. They will run and not get weary. They will walk and not faint or grow weak. What a great verse that is for us today. You know, people have said to me, you've probably had it said to you, that Jesus is just a crutch for weak people to walk on. Whenever they say that to me, I tell them, you're right. You're right. Because spiritually before him, I have nothing. I am weak. When I had knee surgery a few years back, I needed some crutches to help me just walk. And there was times in life when I'm hobbling and I need someone to pick me up and to help me. And I'm not ashamed to lean on him and to ask him to come and help me. It doesn't matter how strong physically we might think we are. We're all the same inside. We all go through the same kinds of stuff. There are times when all of us need that help at times when things get tough. Psalm 71 and verse 16 says, I walk in the strength of the Lord. I walk in the strength of the Lord. You see, it all depends on who you depend on. If you're wanting to know God's blessing on your life, you depend on his wisdom, not your own. You depend on his strength, not your own. Just one final thing I want to suggest is this. You learn to depend on God's timing, not your own. And I know as I say that, that's so much easier to say than it is to live it. But you know, it's so important, so true across so many areas of life, isn't it? You think about the sporting arena. For me, it's going to have to be golf, isn't it? The difference between an amateur golfer and a professional, a really good touring professional, is so often just a question of time and the ability just to bring that club back, to hit the ball at the right time, just to send it off. Haven't I got a beautiful swing? Some of the guys on a Wednesday night in one of our small groups have been coming down to the driving range, and it's the first time they've ever picked up a golf club, and they've discovered that, haven't you, Steve, for yourself, Mark? It isn't as easy as it sometimes looks. You'd think when you play sports like squash or tennis, when you've got a ball that's moving and you've got to compute in your brain just to get that racket to make contact with the ball as it's moving, you're doing all that stuff. You'd think the ball's stationary. It would be really easy, wouldn't you? Mark knows this. I know me and Mark used to play golf together many times. It's difficult. But timing is so often, it's not about strength or speed. Timing is absolutely crucial. We're in bake-off season. Are there any bake-off fans here today? Come on, this is church. You can tell the truth. You don't need to be afraid. I like bake-off. The difference between the okay bakers and the really good bakers is so often down to the amount of time that cake or that food item is left in the oven. A few seconds too short or too long, and that thing can be ruined, can't it? It's all about getting the timing right. And you know, I want to suggest it's no different in our own lives. We've got to depend upon him for his timing. How many of you know that he is always bang on time? He's never early. He's never late. His timing is always perfect in our lives. And I don't know about you, but I don't like waiting. Whether it's at the supermarket checkout, whether it's at the doctor's surgery, whether it's in the school playground, or whether it's the group in front of me on the golf course taking too long. I'm not a great fan of waiting, but the truth is, let's be honest, in life, we spend a lot of time waiting around, don't we? I mean, you're all waiting for me to finish now. You're just trusting that God is going to take me out any moment if I don't draw this to a close. I can read the signs. But how many of you know God doesn't work to our timetable? Hello? He'll work to his own. He's not in a hurry like you or I so often am, because time's not an issue to him. He lives outside of time. Time is something he created for our benefit, to help bring rhythm and order and structure into our lives. But we have to learn to trust him in the midst of it, don't we? And that can be difficult, let's be honest. In our fast-paced culture and society where we want everything now, we get frustrated when things don't happen as fast as we'd like them to. For some of you here today, you might feel that you're in a time of waiting in your life. Maybe it's for a job to be confirmed, or maybe for a relationship issue to get sorted. Some of you might feel like you're really carrying something within you, whether it's a dream or a longing of some kind, something that you feel almost impregnated with that God has given you, but it's just going to be some time before that thing comes to fruition or gets fulfilled. Whatever it is, you're probably saying to yourself time and time, how long, Lord? How long is this going to take? Hear me this morning, Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 11. Let this speak to your soul this morning. God has appointed the right time for everything. Isaiah 60 and verse 22 says, I am the Lord, and when it is time, I will make these things happen quickly. You know, a delay is not a denial. I want you to know this morning that God is always at work behind the scenes. He's always working things that we can't see to bring about his blessing in greater measure in and through your life. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that he's not there or at work. We've just got to learn to keep on trusting in his timing for him to work it out. He knows what he's doing. He's in control. Sometimes it might not feel like that, but be confident today. He knows what he's doing. Don't try and be the answer to your own prayers. If you know the Bible, you'll understand what I mean by this. We don't want Ishmaels, do we? We want Isaacs. We want the promises of God, not the man-made solutions that end up creating greater problems for us in the days to come. We want the blessing of God. And God blesses those who wait and allow him to come and work through in his perfect timing. Depend on his timing, not your own. My time has gone. It all depends on who you depend on. Maybe the band can come back and lead us. We're going to take up an offering. This is our opportunity to give financially. Hear me this morning. If you're here as a guest, let the baskets go before you. If you want to give, make a donation, a gift, by all means, feel free to do so. But this is part of our worship to God, that we trust God with our finance, don't we? We depend on him. Part of that is bringing a tithe. But hear me today, as you go into this week, depend on his wisdom, not on your own. Talk to him constantly throughout the day. Read the scriptures. Discover what he has to say to you. Depend on God's strength, not your own. If you're feeling weary this morning, wait upon him. Wait upon him. Allow him to renew you from within. And give him time to work things out. Depend on his timing, not your own. As we do that, that's the first key to discovering true happiness, that pursuit of happiness in our lives. And I wonder if we can just bow our heads for a moment. If the kids can just be quiet. You're doing great over there, just for a moment. Maybe you're here today and you're saying, if you're really honest to yourself, I want to be happy. And I've tried lots of things to try and find true contentment and fulfillment. But if I'm being absolutely honest with myself today, I recognize that I haven't found it. And I want to say to you today, it all depends on who you depend on. Maybe today is the day that you need to consider putting your dependence upon Jesus and what he did for you on the cross. Not talking about you becoming religious. Not necessarily about joining this church. It's just about discovering God as your heavenly Father who loves you and has a plan and a purpose for your life. And just while every head is bowed, and just while you've got all your eyes closed at the moment, I just want to give you an opportunity just to respond to me, or to respond to God. And if that's you today, you're saying, Richard, I want to put my dependence upon God. I don't understand everything, but I recognize that I'm poor spiritually before him, that I'm without hope. I don't know when I die that I'm going to go to heaven. And I want to know that, have that assurance of that today. I want to put my trust in Jesus. If that's you this morning, just while every eyes closed, just do something for me really quickly. Just put your hand up. As soon as I've seen it, you can put it back down. But is there anyone here today that's saying, I would love to put my trust in Jesus? Thank you for your hand there. God bless you at the back there. Anyone else? God bless. God bless over there. Thank you. Hand at the back. That's great. Is there anyone else that's saying, I want to put my trust in Jesus? Thank you, sir. in this section here. God bless you. Is there anyone else? You're saying yes to Jesus today. Thank you. In the middle section there. That's wonderful. Praise God. If you've put your hand up, please don't leave here today without speaking to myself or Mark. We'd love to pray with you. We've got a gift that we'd love to give you just to help you. And if you feel that you should have put your hand up and you haven't, again, just come and chat with us or chat with the person you came with. Tell them. But for those 6 people who responded this morning, please don't leave here today without coming and talking to us afterwards. Just upstairs in the coffee house would be great. Why don't we stand to our feet? The team are going to lead us in a song. Me and Mark are just going to go and get changed. And then we're going to gather around the baptism. Kids, if you want to come and just join with parents over here.
We'll take our offering now.